here with the former UFC heavyweight champion, just victorious in Japan in Sengoku against Jeff Munson. Mr. Josh Barnett fighting on the Affliction card, July 19th, the Honda Center in Anaheim, California. And the strangest part of it all, you'll be fighting mixed martial arts in America. How about that?
It'll be a nice change that I can just roll out of bed, jump in my car, and just drive down the road to the Honda Center. That's going to be a nice change.
This fight, though, once you get in the ring, we understand this is going to be in a ring and not a cage, will be a rematch from a fight you had with Pedro Rizzo. During the press conference, you demonstrated how it ended. I think it was around 2001. Yet everybody says you're going in as the favorite in this fight. Why do you think that is? You lost in the last fight, and why do you think people are favoring you in the rematch?
I think that they've just based on how they've seen our growth since that fight, how our careers have gone. But you can make all the odds you want to, but in the end, you just gotta let the fights play out. And obviously, you can't take anybody lightly, and you certainly can't let things like that affect your training and your performance. The only thing I know is that if I train really hard and I focus and I come in sharp, I expect things to go my way.
Did you see his fight last September with Jeff Munson?
Yeah, I did. And Jeff also got into that bad habit of slugging it out with him. You think because you're hitting him that you're gonna, at one of these points, he's gonna go down, but it's pretty hard to hit his button.
Jeff, we know, is a tremendous grappler. You seem to do quite well in the grappling aspect with him in the Sengoku card, but Jeff couldn't do anything with Pedro, who comes from primarily a stand-up background. So tell us, since we know Pedro's grappling defense, his takedown defense, he trains with Roberto Litao, a freestyle wrestling coach and a champion in Brazil. Where do you see this fight? Do you think it's going to be mostly standing, or do you think you'll be able to get him down? How do you think it goes?
Well, I absolutely know I can put him down. I can take him to the mat via body locks, throws, shots. I've wrestled with some of the best on a regular basis. Back in Washington, I used to wrestle on a regular basis. Brad Schwartz, Reese Andy, Darren Andy. I wrestled with Rico Chiapparelli, Vladimir Matyashenko. For me, my whole background is from wrestling, and then from that to catch-as-catch-can wrestling. People, will come up to me and go, "Oh, wow, your jiu-jitsu is great," and what's your belt? And I go, "My what?" Your jiu-jitsu? And I go, "I've never taken jiu-jitsu a day in my life. I don't have any jiu-jitsu training whatsoever. I come from wrestling and catch wrestling." And they go, "Uh-huh. But you do submissions, right?" And I go, "Yeah. That just because you've seen it from one place doesn't mean that it hasn't been somewhere else, many years before." If you came up to Frank Gotch and said, "Hey, your jiu-jitsu is great," he'd go, "What?" and throw you in a toe hold. So.
We did a show on Frank Gotch Day a couple of months ago with Mike Chapman, the great amateur wrestling historian, about Frank Gotch and when pro wrestling was to a large degree a real competitive sport, was not a work, as obviously it later became, although there were works during that time. How do you see reestablishing that tradition? Because to me, the one dream that I would have is somebody would establish a catch wrestling promotion where you could win either by pinfall or submission. That to me would be amazing.
Well, there's a guy named Jake Shannon out in California. I work with Jake, so is Eric Paulson.
Scientific Wrestling.
Scientificwrestling.com. Carl Gotch has done a few things with Jake. In fact, we're looking to bring Minoru Suzuki, one of Gotch's students, out to California to do a seminar. He is trying to cultivate and bring back the catch wrestling rules with pinfall and submission, and he's a one-man army and trying to get this done, and so it's quite the uphill battle. But even to a lesser extent, USA Wrestling has adopted grappling. I have worked closely with Jason Townsend, Chris Carlino, and have even toyed with the idea of working with FILA as well on a personal basis through them.
FILA is the International Wrestling Federation, right. Part of the International Olympic Committee.
And they're making some great strides with promoting grappling. And while I don't knock, and I'm very glad that these other people have gone out there and created their grappling tournaments, and they've driven a great avenue for people like Jeff Munson, who is an incredible grappler.
Won a gold medal about a week after getting beaten up by Pedro. He went to Turkey and won a gold medal in the grappling games.
And but I come from freestyle wrestling and Greco wrestling and high school wrestling, so I always felt that submission and and grappling belonged with the USA Wrestling Symposium of Arts, and really, I've been to these other tournaments, but nobody runs it like the wrestling groups do, like USA Wrestling, like FILA. And the first time they held the World Team Trials, it was amazing the look on some of these guys' faces. DQ'd for showing up late, DQ'd for this, DQ'd for that, and they're like, oh, I can't believe this. And I would just look at them and I'd go, this isn't a BS deal. You can't just show up whenever, do whatever, wear whatever. There are rules to be followed, and I guarantee you, this thing will run like clockwork, and it did. And there was a sort of precision that so many people were just unused to. But yet, coming from wrestling, being at Fargo with over 50,000 wrestlers, it takes that kind of organization to get that done. And this is what USA Wrestling Grappling brings to the table. And also hoping Jake Shannon can elevate that catch wrestling rule set as well throughout the nation, and we can really bring back the popularity of wrestling and wrestling with submissions.
Now, you have an incredibly busy schedule with MMA and pro wrestling. Would you have any time to compete in one of these events, either the FILA-sponsored grappling tournaments, which, of course, USA Wrestling is running in America?
I really actually intend to compete in a qualifier so that I can go to the World Team qualifier at some point here or later this year. And I would like to represent the U.S. as the guy for their USA Wrestling grappling team in a World Championships. Obviously, I think if Jeff goes back into it, well, I'll have to compete against him again. But at least this time with no punches and kicks and such, it won't be such a big deal. And I want to, for me, it's really important that every time I step out there that I help promote, and I can talk about pro wrestling the way I believe in it, and catch as catch can and things like that. But the best thing I can do is go out there and lead by example, by showing my art and my skills and competing with it. And that's what I would use this USA Wrestling Grappling to help promote the sport of grappling and USA Wrestling's projects, and to also promote catch wrestling to the masses. And to a lesser extent, I'd like to do that with Jake as well. But like I said, it's so much more difficult for him to organize these events. So we'll see how we can get that done in the future.
All right. Do you have a website or MySpace? People can get in touch.
I have a MySpace page. It's myspace.com/captured suplex, one of the many throws I use. And also I have joshbarnett.tv with an extensive list of my sponsors and whatnot. And I'd also like to say, I really lament the passing of the wrestling program out there at Arizona State. I can't believe that. I remember watching Marcus Malika wrestle as a kid, well, not really so much a kid, but in high school, and thinking, this is an incredible program, and seeing some of the guys that come through there. Dan Severn helped Don Fry when he was down there, and it's a travesty and a complete and utter disrespect that wrestling is falling out of the colleges and the universities here in America. And if anything, if you want to talk about Title IX, if that's the reason or whatever the reason could be, I think women should have wrestling as well. I think that wrestling is one of these sports that lends itself equally to both genders, and I think that women's wrestling is an incredible sport in and of itself. I love watching the women wrestle, and male wrestling as well. I can't. It was hard enough for me being in Washington, graduating, and not having any idea where I could go to continue to wrestle. And I really did want to wrestle in university, but being in Seattle, being in Washington, was in a blank spot. It was like the black hole of wrestling. And watching some of these great programs fall out, like remember when Syracuse dropped theirs, and they had Jason Gleesman, who was such a huge high prospect.
An All-American, I think, in their last year.
Right, and it's just,
Mark Kerr came from there. Right. Larry Owings, who did the great upset of Dan Gable, was from the state of Washington. Right. Dan Henderson wrestled at Arizona State. Yes. On and on. Eric Larkin, who was the Hodge Trophy winner in just 2003. And they were a national champion in 1988, just 20 years ago. And now the program has been closed down with no notice.
Lost their program.
Oregon lost it. Fresno State. That it's Stephen Abbas, three-time NCAA champion, Olympic silver medalist. It's as insane what's happened.
Do whatever you can to support your wrestling programs. Go out there. The tickets don't cost anything to go to a show. And support, if you can help them raise money for their program, if you can just raise awareness. Anything you can do to help wrestling is going to be much appreciated, because I can promise you the best fighters in the world are going to come from wrestling.